Chicago, October 1931. The courtroom was packed wall to wall. Reporters lined the back rows, pencils ready, cigarette smoke curling toward the ceiling. Federal agents stood near the exits, eyes scanning the crowd. At the defense table sat Al Capone, 32 years old, dressed in a custom-tailored navy suit, diamond cufflinks catching the light. His face was calm, almost bored, as if the trial was beneath him. But when the prosecutor called the next witness, something shifted in his eyes, a flicker of recognition, then something colder. The government calls James Marino to the stand. James Marino, Jimmy, the kid from Brooklyn who used to split candy bars with young Alponts on summer stoops. The boy who'd taught him to pitch pennies, who'd run beside him through alleys when cops chased them. The man Capone once called brother. Capone's lawyer leaned over. Al, who is this? But Capone didn't answer. 23 years of memories flooded back, rooftop sunsets, first steps into speakeasies, envelopes of cash when Jimmy's mother needed surgery. The memories shattered when Jimmy walked down the aisle. He was thinner than Capone remembered, shoulders hunched, suit cheap and ill-fitting. He didn't look at the defense table. He just walked to the witness stand, raised his right hand, and swore to tell the truth. And that was where everything began to unravel. Mr. Marino, the prosecutor began, you've known the defendant for how long? 23 years, Jimmy said quietly, voice cracking. And during that time, were you involved in Mr. Capone's business operations? Jimmy hesitated. His hands gripped the witness stand, knuckles white. He glanced at the prosecutor, then the judge, then finally at Al Capone. Their eyes met for half a second, just long enough for Jimmy to see the boy from Brooklyn who used to laugh until he cried. But then Jimmy looked away. Yes, can you describe what you witnessed? The courtroom went silent. Every eye was on Jimmy Marino. Reporters leaned forward, pencils hovering, and what came out of his mouth next would seal Al Capone's fate for 11 years. Jimmy described everything, the speakeasies behind barbershops where whiskey flowed and jazz played until dawn, the payoffs to police captains in dim parking lots, cash-stuffed envelopes changing hands, the ledgers hidden in a flower shop on South Wabash, meticulous records of every dollar flowing through Capone's empire. The cash stuffed into leather bags every Thursday night at the Lexington Hotel, how he'd personally carried those bags to banks across 3 states. He named names, police chiefs, aldermen, judges, men who'd taken Capone's money and looked the other way. He dismantled the empire he'd helped build, brick by brick, transaction by transaction. His voice never wavered, his eyes never filled with tears. He just sat there, mechanically destroying everything, like a man reciting someone else's life. Every word was a nail in the coffin. Every detail another year added to the sentence, and through it all, Capone sat perfectly still. He didn't interrupt, he didn't object, he didn't even flinch when Jimmy described the night they'd paid off a federal agent outside a diner in Cicero, the same agent now sitting in the gallery, watching Jimmy testify under immunity. Capone just watched his childhood friend with the expression a man might wear while watching a house burn down, detached, distant, as if the loss was already complete and all that remained was the smoke. His lawyer kept glancing at him, waiting for some signal, some instruction, but Capone gave none. He simply lit a cigar, took a slow drag, and exhaled toward the ceiling as if Jimmy's words were nothing more than background noise. When the prosecutor finished, Capone's lawyer stood up, adjusting his tie. His voice was controlled, but there was an edge to it. Mr. Marino, did Al Capone ever threaten you? No. Did he ever harm you or your family? No. In fact, when your mother needed surgery in 1926, didn't Mr. Capone personally pay for it? Jimmy's jaw tightened. Yes. And when your younger brother was arrested for petty theft, didn't Mr. Capone hire the best lawyer in Chicago to defend him? Yes. And when you yourself were short on rent, didn't Mr. Capone give you money, no strings attached? Yes. Jimmy's voice was barely a whisper now. The lawyer stepped closer. Then why are you testifying against him today? The question hung in the air. The courtroom held its breath. Jimmy finally looked at Capone again. For the first time since entering the courtroom, their eyes met and held. And in that moment, something passed between them. Not anger, not hatred, just the quiet, terrible recognition of a friendship that had died long before this trial began. A friendship sacrificed on the altar of survival. Because, Jimmy said slowly, voice breaking for the first time, I wanted to live. The prosecutor had offered immunity from prosecution, a new identity, witness protection, a chance to disappear into the American countryside and become someone else. Someone who didn't wake up every morning wondering if today was the day the Chicago outfit came for him. and Jimmy had taken it. He had traded 23 years of brotherhood for 23 more years of breathing. He had chosen life over loyalty, and sitting there on the witness stand with all those eyes on him, he wasn't sure if that made him smart or broken. Capone's face didn't change. He just nodded once, not agreement, not forgiveness, just acknowledgement. The verdict came on October 17, 1931, guilty on 5 counts of tax evasion, 11 years in federal prison. When the judge read the verdict, Capone stood calmly and accepted his fate. As the guards approached with handcuffs, he turned toward the gallery, eyes sweeping the crowd until they found Jimmy Marino in the back row, hat pulled low, trying to disappear. Their eyes locked, just for a second, and in that second, Capone's expression shifted to something sadder, something that looked almost like pity. Then the handcuffs clicked shut and Al Capone was led out. Reporters shouted, cameras flashed, but Capone said nothing. He walked out like a man who'd already left the world behind. Jimmy Marino disappeared 3 days after the verdict. The government relocated him to Portland, Oregon under a new name, James Morrison. They gave him $5,000, a social security card, and a warning: never contact anyone from your old life. He followed the rules, opened a hardware store, married a schoolteacher named Helen who knew nothing about Chicago, had 2 daughters, Mary and Catherine, who grew up thinking their father was just another small-town shopkeeper. But every night for 11 years, Jimmy lay awake listening. The creak of floorboards, the rustle of wind, every sound made his heart race, made his hand reach for the revolver in the nightstand. Every stranger who walked into his store carried the terrible possibility that the past had caught up. November 1942, Al Capone was released from Alcatraz. Syphilis had ravaged his mind and body. The doctors said he had the mental capacity of a 12-year-old. The man who once ruled Chicago could barely speak. His family moved him to Palm Island, Florida, where he spent his days staring at the ocean, trapped inside a dissolving mind. The newspapers ran the story: public enemy number 1 reduced to a shell. The government closed the file on James Marino. The threat was gone, but that was not the whole truth. December 1942, Portland, Oregon. Winter rain came down in sheets, turning Main Street into a river of mud and reflected streetlights. Jimmy was closing his hardware store when he heard it. The low rumble of an expensive car engine. A black Cadillac pulled up to the curb, chrome bumper gleaming in the rain. The engine idled. The windows were tinted dark. Jimmy's hand froze on the key. His heart hammered. The back door opened. A man stepped out, tall, broad-shouldered, long wool coat, fedora pulled low. No gun, just a manila envelope. Lightning flashed. Jimmy recognized him immediately. Frank Nitti, Capone's enforcer. "Hello, Jimmy," Nitti said calmly. "It's been a long time. I thought he was sick. He is, but he still remembers you. I can't. I have a family, please. This isn't a hit, Jimmy. If it was, you'd already be dead. We've known where you were for 6 years. That stopped Jimmy cold. 6 years. Al wanted to know you were safe, so we kept an eye on you." Nitti gestured down the street. "Nice store, nice family. You did good. Then what do you want?" "Al wants to see you, one last time." Jimmy looked at the envelope. "What's that?" Nitti held it out. "Train ticket to Miami. First class, tomorrow morning. Al will be waiting. And if I don't go," Nitti smiled without warmth, "then you spend the rest of your life wondering what he wanted to say. You'll lie awake thinking about the friend you betrayed, imagining what he might have told you, and you'll never know." He placed the envelope on the Cadillac's hood, water beating on its surface. "Be smart, Jimmy. Go see him, then come home to your daughters." He tipped his hat. "If you decide not to go, that's fine too. Al won't hold it against you. He just wanted to give you the choice." The Cadillac pulled away, taillights disappearing into the rain. Jimmy stood there staring at the envelope. Inside was a first-class ticket and a handwritten note on expensive stationery. "Jimmy, I don't have much time left. Come see me, please. Al." The handwriting was shaky, barely legible. A sick man's handwriting. Jimmy didn't sleep. He sat at the kitchen table while his family slept, the ticket before him. At dawn, he made his choice. He kissed his daughters goodbye, told Helen a distant cousin in Florida was sick. And at 7:45, James Morrison, who used to be Jimmy Marino, boarded a train heading south. Palm Island, Florida, December 18, 1942. The taxi dropped Jimmy at the gates just after noon. Florida sun was bright and merciless. Palm trees swayed in the ocean breeze. The air smelled of salt and citrus and decay. The estate was smaller than expected. Not the fortress of legend, but a quiet, sun-bleached mansion. The iron gate stood open. No guards, just a nurse in white waiting on the steps. She led him inside without a word. The hallway was lined with photographs, Al in his prime, surrounded by men in suits, cigars raised. Frank Nitti, Mayor Lansky, Lucky Luciano. All of them were gone now, dead, imprisoned, vanished. The empire had crumbled. The photographs were ghosts. At the end of the hall was a sunroom. And there, in a wicker chair facing the ocean, sat Al Capone. Jimmy stopped in the doorway. He couldn't breathe. The man in the chair looked nothing like the photographs. The broad shoulders had withered to bone. The sharp eyes were clouded. His hands trembled on the armrests. Simple white shirt, linen pants, barefoot, hair uncombed. A dying man forgotten by time, but when Jimmy stepped into the room, Capone turned his head slowly, and for just a moment the fog lifted. Recognition sparked in his eyes. "Jimmy," he said. His voice was hoarse, faint, like wind through dry leaves. "Al." Capone gestured weakly to a chair. "Sit." Jimmy sat. The wicker creaked. Between them was a small table with lemonade and 2 glasses. Silence stretched, heavy and electric. The ocean rolled. Seagulls cried. A clock ticked somewhere. Finally, Capone spoke. "You got old." Jimmy laughed, a bitter sound. "So did you." "Yeah, but I got old in a cage. You got old in the sun." He paused, unfocused eyes searching for Jimmy's face. "Your daughters, Mary and Catherine. Helen's a teacher, right?" Jimmy's throat tightened. "You know about my daughters. Nitti told me. You did good, Jimmy. Better than me." Tears burned behind Jimmy's eyes. "I'm sorry, Al. I'm so sorry." Capone raised a trembling hand. Don't apologize for surviving. That's all we ever did, from Brooklyn on, survive. I sent you to prison." "No, the government sent me to prison. Hoover sent me to prison. My own greed sent me to prison. You just told the truth, and I can't hate a man for telling the truth. But listen to me, Jimmy." Capone leaned forward slightly, his clouded eyes searching. "I spent 11 years in that cage, Alcatraz. You know what it's like. Concrete and steel and the sound of the ocean mocking you through the walls. No sunlight, no fresh air, just counting hours until you could sleep, then counting hours until you could wake up." He paused, breathing heavily. "You know what I thought about every single day?" Jimmy shook his head, unable to speak. "Not revenge, not anger, not even the empire I lost." Capone's voice dropped to a whisper. "I thought about Brooklyn, about you and me stealing apples from that cart on Mulberry Street, running like hell while old Mr. Rosselli chased us with his cane. About the time you broke your arm jumping off the fire escape trying to impress that girl. What was her name?" "Rosie DeLuca," Jimmy whispered. "Rosie DeLuca." Capone smiled, a real smile. "I carried you 6 blocks to the hospital. You were crying so hard you couldn't breathe, and I told you jokes the whole way. Stupid jokes, but you laughed anyway." Jimmy wiped his eyes. Capone continued, voice soft and distant. "I thought about the night your old man died. You were 15. You came to my apartment at 2 in the morning, just stood there in the doorway not saying anything, and I knew from the look on your face. You slept on my floor that night because you couldn't stand being alone." "I remember," Jimmy said. "Those are the things I thought about, Jimmy. Not the money, not the power, not even the freedom." Capone turned to face him fully, and for the first time his eyes seemed clear, focused, the fog burned away by something deeper. "You were my brother, and brothers forgive." The words hung in the air between them, simple and absolute. "Why?" Jimmy's voice broke. "Why would you forgive me?" "Because I needed to tell you something I should have said in that courtroom." Capone's eyes held his. "I forgive you, and I need you to forgive yourself." The words hit Jimmy like a fist to the chest. The nurse appeared in the doorway. "Mr. Capone, it's time for your rest." Capone waved her away weakly. He reached into his jacket pocket with shaking hands and pulled out a small, worn photograph. He handed it to Jimmy. It was the 2 of them, 12 years old, standing on a Brooklyn stoop, arms around each other's shoulders, grinning like they owned the world. "I kept this," Capone said, "even in Alcatraz, even when everything else was gone. I kept this because it reminded me that before I was Scarface, before I was public enemy #1, I was just Al Ponce, and you were just Jimmy, and we were friends." Jimmy held the photograph, his hands trembling. "Keep it," Capone said, "and when you're old, when your daughters ask you about me, don't tell them about the trial. Don't tell them about the testimony. Tell them we were kids together. Tell them we were brothers." Jimmy couldn't speak. He just nodded. Capone leaned back in his chair, exhausted. His eyes drifted closed. "Go home, Jimmy. Hug your girls. Live your life, and forgive yourself, because I already did." The nurse gently touched Jimmy's shoulder. "Sir, you need to leave now." Jimmy stood slowly. He looked at Al Capone one last time, the most feared man in America, now a shell of his former self, drifting into sleep beneath the Florida sun. "Goodbye." "Al," Jimmy whispered. Capone didn't open his eyes, but his lips moved, barely a whisper. "Goodbye, brother." Jimmy Marino returned to Oregon. He never spoke of that meeting. He kept the photograph in his wallet for the rest of his life, and when he died in 1978, his daughters found it pressed between the pages of a Bible along with a handwritten note. "Forgiveness is not weakness, it is the final act of strength. A.C." Al Capone died on January 25, 1947, 4 years after that meeting. His funeral was attended by family only. No mob bosses, no reporters, just the people who loved him before the legend began. But in a small town in Oregon, a man named Jimmy Marino sat in his living room, holding a black and white photograph of two boys on a Brooklyn stoop, and wept. Because in the end, beneath the violence, the empire, and the ruin, there was something more human than any courtroom could ever understand. There was brotherhood, there was memory, and there was grace.